He hired her as a temporary driver, but she ended up helping his company secure a major deal. Hello guys, welcome to another exciting movie journey with us. Get ready as we take you through the full gist of this popular Nigerian movie filled with strong morals and hidden lessons. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe. There are plenty of exciting movie goodies coming your way. So grab your popcorn and let's dive into this unforgettable story. The movie begins with a wealthy businessman named David, who is on a phone call with his friend. He complains that his driver ran away with his expensive wristwatch and some cash. He then asks his friend to help him find a taxi that can take him to work. In another scene, we're introduced to a beautiful young lady named Anne, who works as an Uber driver. She's on the phone with her sibling, who's asking her for money. Frustrated, she complains about her financial struggles. Shortly after, her friend checks in on her to see how she's doing. Later, Anne drives off to pick up David. During the trip, David calls her to give her directions. After waiting for some time, David begins to complain about how dishonest cab drivers can be. Eventually, he receives Anne's call, informing him that she's outside his house. Meanwhile, inside David's house, his young and attractive girlfriend, Mira, is live streaming on social media. As David is about to leave, he asks her why she hasn't gone to work. Mira responds that she quit her job because it was too stressful. David reminds her that she quit a job that paid 600,000 naira per month. He doesn't say anything more and walks out. That same morning, while Anne is driving David to work, he makes a rude comment that offends her. They exchange a few sharp words. When they arrive at his destination, another round of argument breaks out, even after David tips her. Anne continues her daily work, picking up and dropping off passengers. Later that day, Mira goes on an online shopping spree. However, when it's time to pay using David's ATM cards, they both get declined. There's no money in the accounts. At the same time, Anne returns home to her friend Ify, who is feeling down because she just lost her job and their landlord is giving them problems. Anne drops the foodstuff she bought and then receives a call from David. She heads out again. On their way home, David apologizes for being rude earlier, and Anne also apologizes for calling him rude. When they arrive at David's house, he offers her a temporary job as his driver. Anne happily accepts. Inside the house, Mira complains to David that she tried to make an online payment, but his card was declined. David angrily tells her she's already spent all the money on both cards. He scolds her for blowing 10 million naira in just 1 month and for quitting a well-paying job. That night, Anne shares the good news with Ify that David hired her. She also tells her that he apologized. This makes Ify happy, and they both go to bed in good spirits. The next morning, Mira returns from the gym and sees another woman driving David to work. Curious and suspicious, she calls one of David's staff members to ask about the lady, but the staff says she doesn't know anything about her. Later that same day, Anne drops David off at the office. Mira, meanwhile, is still on a mission to find out who Anne is. At noon, Anne comes to pick David up, just as Mira arrives at the office and spots the same car she saw earlier that morning. She starts to feel insecure about her relationship with David. Later, David goes to pick up one of his team members for an important presentation. Before stepping out of the car, he hands Anne a file to hold. Anne looks through it while waiting. When David returns, he's frustrated that a key person is absent. Anne offers to help with the presentation, mentioning that it was her major in school. She even suggests a minor adjustment. Curious, David asks her to do a mock presentation for him right there in the car. She does, and he's impressed. Immediately, he takes her to a boutique to buy a dress so she can present on his behalf. Meanwhile, Mira returns to David's office to confront him, but he's not around. She parks her car and waits, hiding. Later, David is seen smiling. He's thrilled that Anne impressed the board with her presentation. When they return to the office, Mira suddenly appears and confronts David in front of Anne. David tells Mira that Anne is just his taxi driver. Mira doesn't believe him, but Anne chooses to leave anyway. That evening, after Anne dropped David off, he paid her both for helping save his company with the successful presentation and for the day's fare. Back at his house, Mira confronted David about using a female taxi driver when she had already given him the contact of her own cab driver. David refused to explain himself and simply went upstairs. Still upset, Mira called David's mother to complain about him hiring a female driver. Shortly after, David received a call from his mother. She urged him to fire Anne and hire a different driver in order to protect his relationship with Mira. Reluctantly, David agreed. That night, Anne shared the news with Ify that David had paid her 200,000 naira for saving his company. She also revealed to Ify that David is actually the CEO of Empire Tech. Ify was surprised and excited, mentioning that many single women in the city were desperate to have a man like David, but his mother had been trying to force a particular woman on him. The next day, David's mother called him again to remind him to sack Anne, insisting that doing so would help save his relationship with Mira. Mira clearly has a lot of insecurity issues she needs to deal with. But let's continue. That evening, David returned home to find a new driver named Joshua sitting in his living room. As David interviewed him, Joshua spoke nervously and rambled, which made David lose interest. David walked away while Mira followed him upstairs. She then told David that his mother was the one who hired Joshua and insisted again that he fire Anne immediately. David gave in and terminated Anne's contract. Later that night, a sad Anne broke the news to Ify that David had ended their contract. But here comes the twist. A few days later, Anne excitedly told Ify that David had called and invited her to his office. Both women were surprised and couldn't figure out why David would reach out to her again. And guess what? Anne later called Ify on the phone with exciting news. David had offered her the position of human resources manager at his company, and she was to resume the next day. The following day, David's secretary informed Mira that Anne had been hired as the company's HR. This sent Mira's insecurity through the roof. She immediately stormed into David's office to confront Anne. But David came downstairs, defended Anne in front of Mira, and then walked away with her. Mira, however, quickly called David's mother to report what had just happened. On the way to a board meeting, David received a call from his mother but declined it. Later at the office, she called again. This time, David picked up and explained to her that he hired Anne because she had helped him secure a major contract. He added that Anne was a rare gem and someone he couldn't afford to lose. But is that really the full story? Let's find out together. That evening, while Anne was driving home, Mira blocked her car on the road. She confronted Anne and offered her 1 million naira to quit the job, along with a promise to secure her a position at another reputable company that would pay double what she earned at Empire Tech. Anne refused the offer and drove away. That same evening, Anne returned home and told Ify what had happened. They discussed it, and Ify advised her not to quit her job at Empire Tech. Later that night, Anne became emotional and cried about the overwhelming struggles in her life. Ify comforted her and encouraged her to get some rest. The next day, David gave Anne the sum of $20,000 to deliver to an engineer named KC at a construction site. On her way there, Anne was deep in thought. She considered running away with the money. It was enough to solve all of her family's problems. But would that really fix everything? Wouldn't that turn her into a criminal on the run? Wouldn't it haunt her for the rest of her life? Well, let's find out what she chooses to do. Later that evening, the engineer called David and informed him that he hadn't received the money. That night, David repeatedly tried to call Anne, but she ignored his calls. Mira walked in and asked him what was wrong, but David didn't respond. Instead, he walked away in silence. 1 week later, David was still trying to reach Anne, but her number remained unreachable. Meanwhile, Ify was growing increasingly worried that her friend had disappeared without a trace. Later, David invited Ify to his office. While questioning her about Anne's whereabouts, Ify told him that Anne had previously rejected a tempting offer of 1 million naira from Mira just to quit her job. She said Anne was not someone who could run away with money. Hearing this, David promised he would go home and confront Mira. That same evening, David confronted Mira about Anne's disappearance. Mira, however, denied having anything to do with it. Meanwhile, back at home, Ify was talking to herself, deeply worried about Anne, and recalling the last emotional conversation they had, how Anne had opened up about her life struggles. That night, David also reflected on his memories with Anne, thinking about the moments they shared and recalling how she once told him her life story. But here's the twist. Anne had actually been kidnapped. she was being held captive by a group of thugs. Then, to everyone's shock, Mira arrived at the hideout, instructed the rough-looking men to end Anne, and collected her own share of the $20,000. Anne pleaded with Mira, explaining that she was the sole provider for her family, but Mira ignored her and walked out. However, just moments after Mira left, officers from the Nigerian police, along with David, stormed the hideout. Mira was arrested on the spot, and Anne was rescued, though the kidnappers managed to escape. David then told Mira that he had overheard her entire conversation with the criminals, including how they planned to share the money. He also mentioned how she lied to him, claiming she was visiting her aunt in the hospital, which made him suspicious and follow her. Mira was stunned and taken away by the police, while Anne was safely rescued. Months later, Anne thanked David for standing by her. She expressed deep gratitude for all he had done, clearing her mother's debt, paying for her mother's treatment, renting them a new apartment, and even increasing her salary. David encouraged her, telling her how proud he was of her strength and resilience. And that's it, guys. This story reminds us that integrity, hard work, and honesty always win in the end. Even when faced with tough choices, staying true to one's values brings lasting rewards. On the other hand, envy and betrayal may offer quick gains, but they ultimately lead to disgrace and downfall. Thank you for joining us on this exciting episode. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notification bell for more interesting and fascinating episodes like this. Until we meet again, goodbye.